Greetings, fellow recording nerds! Okay, so I started the series a few weeks back, taking a look at some common mistakes musicians make when recording at home, and unwittingly adding a ton of extra work to the guy that they hire to mix their record. Now, we did a general guide as well as bass and vocals. Today, we're gonna look at a bunch of mistakes you guitar players make at home, even if your own ego say that's completely impossible. Now, if you're recording your guitar at home, either for your own project or you're handing your tracks off to somebody else to mix, here's a handy guide of 14 things to keep in mind so that way you don't screw yourself completely. Number 1, get the guitar in recording shape. Is your beloved instrument actually worthy of being recorded? And I'm not talking about brand or even expense, because I've got a pair of Harley Benton Amrocks that are affordable and definitely studio ready. I'm talking about the guitar's condition. Is it actually capable of amplifying your playing? I've certainly seen some utter crap come in here over the years, but the absolute worst offender of all time was one of the cool kids from my high school days. He put a band together several years after graduation. Actually, I was the graduate. He dropped out in the 11th grade, and they came in sometime around 1999. Now, this is especially memorable because he brought in the most horrible piece of shit vintage guitar I've ever seen in my life. I really wish I had pictures of this thing because it was rather unique. It was like everything that could go wrong with a guitar was featured on this instrument, if you could even call it that. It was badly intonated and the bridge screws were stripped so we couldn't adjust it. All the internal wiring was twisted together and held with electrical tape and not actually soldered. He also sanded off the finish and left the wood exposed so it dried out and resonated with the musicality of a stack of printer paper. Speaking of paper, he removed the neck pickup and had a picture covering the empty cavity. The unintended consequence being that the guitar would sound like a fucking banjo when he played it. I guess nobody could ever actually explain to them that banjos really aren't very metal, now are they? Now, of course, my first impulse was to grab an actual functioning instrument and put it in his hands, but he came back at me with, well, if I can't record with this guitar, then I'm not going to play at all. Now, remember what I said on this show numerous times about being easy to work with? This was early in my career, and I was willing to deal with a lot in order to establish a clientele. These days would be more a case of, all right, you don't want to record with that? There's the door. Go waste somebody else's time. Now, fortunately, my very good friend Steve was on hand, and he's damn good at setting up instruments. I think we put a good 4 or 5 hours into getting this guitar into some kind of recording shape. And this is why you never charge flat rates, guys. Don't do it. You will get screwed. We somehow got the guitar intonated with stripped screws and all. We removed the banjo pickup cover and rewired the electronics, including properly soldering all the electrical connections. And the next day, of course, the guitar player's like, wow, this sounds so much better. It's like, yeah, no fucking shit, genius! It is amazing what happens when you make proper electrical connections on an electric instrument. Now, it was even more fun when it was time to lay down vocals, and I had to waste several hours explaining to him that catastrophe is not the correct pronunciation of the word catastrophe, like this entire project turned out to be. Oh yeah, there's nothing more fun than being lectured about the finer points of the English language by somebody who couldn't even handle 11th grade. And the ultimate cherry on top of the whipped cream that was this project, when we finished, he tried to pay me with a Canadian Tire gift card. Now, what does all this mean for you guys who want to record guitar at home? If your guitar's in that kind of shape, don't fucking record it! Borrow something better, otherwise you're just wasting your time and, more importantly, the mix engineer's time when he has to fix all the shitty tracks you laid down. If he's charging by the hour, this could get real expensive real quick. So whatever happened to the guy with the shitty guitar and the rock star attitude? Well, of course he went on to become a world-famous guitar player. Except that never fucking happened. The reality is he wound up homeless and died of a drug overdose. And the really sad thing is, those of us who knew him from the high school days didn't even find out about it until 2 years after he died. I say this not to mock the guy, but I say this as a cautionary tale. Dropping out of high school and taking drugs is just not a winning combination, even if you are a really good guitar player. Number 2, avoid the first generation Focusrite Scarlett. Now, it is no secret that the Focusrite Scarlett is popular with you guys. I did a poll a couple weeks back and 24,000 of you guys voted on it. 49% of you guys are recording onto some kind of Focusrite gear. Now, one could safely assume that's probably the Scarlett series and not the Pro Level Red series, because in my experience, musicians will spend stupid amounts of money on their guitar and as little as possible on everything else. Now, the first generation Scarlett had a terrible problem with a lack of headroom. Guitar players using hot pickups for metal just simply could not get the input quiet enough to record a proper direct signal without it being squared off. The end result was being, well, pretty much shit. Now, the second generation Scarlett managed to fix the headroom issue, but I've certainly heard a lot of my colleagues complaining that the direct input on it has a certain boxiness to the sound. So much so that they can call up their clients and say, "Hey, you used a Scarlett on this, didn't you?" And the reply is usually, "How'd you know?" Now, apparently the third generation Scarlett is a serious improvement, and I hope to shoot the two out on the show in the coming weeks. However, the one thing I've always recommended to guitar players is purchasing a good direct box. A Countryman Type 48 will set you back a whopping $152 at Sweetwater and last you a lifetime. I've had mine since 2006 and it's outlasted several recording interfaces and has never, ever let me down. With a direct box, you can bypass your interface's built-in DI, which may or may not be of questionable quality, and instead go in through the mic preamps, which are generally going to be much cleaner. The subtle metaphor I'm getting at here is if you're really that concerned with your sound and you want the best, why the fuck are you not getting a direct box? Don't you think it would be a good idea to start with the best fucking source possible? And if I am not getting through to you, let me spell it out in terms that even your bass player can understand. Interface DI? Maybe okay. Direct box? Very good! Get this, you cheap fuck! Number 3, don't assume you're an expert at recording amps. This subject came up a few weeks ago on viewers' comments, and I need to address it. The guitar player who knows what he's doing and has his sound, and therefore doesn't need to record a direct signal. Okay, well, that's absolutely fantastic that you've got your sound, but a direct signal can save a mix engineer a whole lot of work because we can think beyond what a guitar player's ego is capable of and consider the way how the instrument will fit into an entire mix. Now look, I get it, that's a pretty difficult concept for a lot of you 6-string axe slingers out there, but weirdly enough, there are other people in your band. Here's the thing, we can use a DI signal to trigger a cock blocker plugin and save several hours of editing the noise out of the rests of your high-gain guitars, and therefore saving your arrogant ass some money. And a point worth mentioning that will come to as a shock to absolutely nobody, many guitar players who record multiple mics sometimes will get them out of phase, and then submit their tracks that have been mixed down so there's no way to fix it! So those in conjunction with no DI track means you, the fucking guitar player who knows everything, who just spent weeks capturing his brilliant performance, will be forced to re-record all his guitars from scratch. And by direct signal, I am not talking about the amp sound coming out of your Kemper or Axe effects. You can give us that, that's fine, but we really need the plain sound coming off your pickups. No, really. Because a direct signal is more than just something that you're too lazy to record. It is your safety net. It can save your ass in case something unexpected happens and can possibly save you endless hours of work in terms of retracking. Because badly recorded guitars can be reamped with a clean direct signal. And probably through better gear than even you've got. And I'm not just talking about amps, but cabinets and microphones and preamps as well. Because the performance is still there. But my tone, you say in a whiny voice. Hold on a second, weren't you one of those guys who keeps on telling me that the sound is in the hands? So then what's the big fucking deal with reamping? If the sound is truly in your hands, reamping will not change it. So do us all a favor, stop whining like the gigantic pain in the ass you are and buy a fucking Countryman already. Especially if you have an Axe Effects, because I really haven't been too impressed with the direct signals coming off those. Once again, a Countryman is only $150. If you want to make a serious recording, there is absolutely no excuse to not get one. 4, don't give us noisy DI signals. Look, I understand it's fun to record your guitar from behind a refrigerator right next to a gigantic electric motor, but seriously, stop fucking doing it! It would be really nice if we could get direct signals without added electrical interference. It's staggering how many amazing musicians just can't seem to record their guitar without managing to pick up every single bit of electromagnetic radiation generated by the sun into their pickups. And I'm talking about guys you've seen on this show. It's like, I get the tracks, what the fuck? When tracking, please try to stay as far back from your computer as possible. Stop noodling on your guitar, crank up your amp or amp sim, turn off your noise gate, and try listening to the sound that's being creative. Are you generating a horrible buzz? You may want to change your location in the room, or even just turn your guitar slightly. Sit in a rotating office chair and see what angle creates the least amount of noise. Now, when we were back at Harmony Studios in Hollywood, we were right next to a Russian grocery store, and the electrical noise in that studio was fucking horrible. And that's because there were industrial grade freezers right next to us. No matter what we did, the noise was always constant. Some guitars were just completely untrackable because of it. And after much experimentation, we found a spot in the control room that seemed to be a good null position. And if you held your guitar just a certain way, it was possible to work in there. So if you've got noise issues in your own home studio, move around and find the spot where it's at least bearable. Don't give me a track with the attitude, well, you can just fix it, because that's going to cost you time and money. Give your mix engineer the best source possible. This is one area where half measures simply aren't good enough. Number 5, that expensive Gibson won't stay in tune. I've had some utterly beautiful Gibsons come into the studio over the years, and without fail, I've spent more time tuning them than recording them. This isn't an isolated incident, this is every single fucking time, especially with Les Pauls. For those, I'd highly recommend getting a string butler or similar product to counteract the flawed design that is the Les Paul headstock. Otherwise, prepare to spend many a fun-filled hour tuning and retuning your guitar in order to be able to track it. I guess I'm weird that way, but I'd rather spend my studio time actually playing fucking music. But hey, I get it. It says Gibson on that headstock, so it's gotta be awesome. Play authentic! That is when you finally get the fucking thing in tune! Now, the biggest waste of time guitar I ever had come in here was a late 60s SG. Great sounding guitar, played great, stayed in tune for about 3 seconds at a time. We were working on the 2009 Betrayer album, and we had to throw out an entire album's worth of quad-tracked rhythm guitars once we started comparing them to my Schecter Hellraiser. One sounded nice and tight, the other sounded like a fucking unintentional chorus pedal. In this case, SG truly stood for shitty guitar. Number 6, proper levels and file format. Now, I've already covered this in many other videos, but I have to stress just how important getting the correct level is. Record at 24 bits, 48 kilohertz, and you should be fine. If your mix engineer needs something in a different format, he should let you know. Otherwise, you can always just ask just to make sure. But when you're tracking, aim for the -6 to -12 dB mark on your meters. Remember, this is an analog and you don't want to peg your signal into the reds. Once again, do not put your signal into the reds! I get it, you're great at guitar, but that's no help when you keep clipping the fuck out of your signals. I can't be any more clear than that. No reds, you big dumb fucking moron! If your tracks look like this, then you really fucked up. Digital systems sound so much better with a bit of headroom, and the 24-bit file format gives you an amazing amount of signal-to-noise ratio. Even if you're recording at like -12 dBs, you've still got shit tons of room below that before you'll ever hear the noise floor. But then again, on the other hand, don't be a dumbass and record at like -50 dBs or something equally stupid. Have your peaks, that means your loudest bits, hit at the -6 dB mark. Easiest way to do this? Chug hard on your guitar and dial in the gain and hit the -6 dB mark. And you're good to go. Number 7, use foam. You want to verify Newton's first law? An object in motion tends to stay in motion? Plug a guitar into a high-gain amp, strike a chord, and mute it. Yeah, lots of fiddly bits like to keep going. Like the strings behind the nut or behind your bridge if you got a tune-o-matic, or the springs on your extremely easy to set up Floyd Rose tremolo. I find it's a great idea to have a little block of foam on hand to jam these into spots that the strings keep ringing when you don't want them to. Like this brand new Charbonneau guitar I just put into my Tonewood shootout. They're amazing guitars and they play brilliantly and they ring out like crazy. Now, a little bit of foam behind the nut to keep the strings from ringing out can really clean things up. Not only for your rests, but for when you're playing as well, because they're going to add overtones into your guitar sound and not always in the key you're playing in. I find that the treble spots can vary from guitar to guitar depending on the design. Now my Hellraiser has a tune-o-matic, but foam behind the nut is most effective with that guitar. Foam behind the bridge can kill a bit too much of the resonance and affect the sustain, so in this case, it's a bit of a trade-off. I found that the best result is just by muting the high strings behind the bridge. But as always, your mileage may vary. It's always a good idea to try a few things out and find out what works best for your situation. And a side note, yeah, as far as hard rock and metal are concerned, Tonewood is complete and utter bullshit. Watch my follow-up video coming out next week. Number 8, pay attention to what's being played, but more importantly, what's not being played. Now this goes right along with the foam behind the nut trick. Keep a roll of masking tape on hand to keep those open strings from ringing out. If you're playing high up on the strings with a lot of gain, chances are the low strings are moving and you might not even be noticing. If you're having issues on a particular passage, figure out what strings you don't need and tape them off to keep them from moving. Now, I ran into a situation a few years ago where I had a guitar player recording remotely, doing a guest appearance on a client's record, and he sent me his tracks, and of course, we ran into this exact issue. He was doing some really impressive tapping stuff, and his strings were ringing out just all over the place. His otherwise brilliant performance was basically ruined by out-of-key strings. Now, when I suggested taping off some of the strings that he wasn't using, and I'm not making this up, he came back with this reply: "That's cheating!" Oh, for fuck's sakes, I'm trying to get a record done for paying clients, and your ego just brought this whole thing to a screeching halt. Seriously, this is why there are only a handful of session musicians out there who can make a living doing it, because they're smart enough to do the job and not interject their personal opinions when they're not required. I think we managed to get something passable, but it took a lot of coaxing, and this just should not have happened. If you're hired to do a job, then do it, and shut the fuck up about it! Don't make it difficult, because next time, the job's just gonna go to somebody else. Number 9, double track and don't copy and paste them, you lazy bastard. Now, one of the keys to an awesome metal rhythm sound is to track your guitar twice and pan it out left and right. It sounds huge, sounds great, and it's absolutely the key to a rock-solid foundation in your mix. So why the fuck do guitar players insist on tracking only once and copy and paste the other side with a slight delay? Look, this play doesn't work as intended. You're creating something called the Haas or precedence effect, and it just doesn't sound as good. Now, granted, this is a pretty subtle shift, and I can see why it might be easy to miss if you're recording at home, you don't know what to listen for. But if you listen closely, you can hear a bit of comb filtering going on, and that takes some of the impact away from the guitars. Now, of course, the dumbest thing you can do is double track your guitars and then copy paste a few bars from left to right because you're just too lazy to fix the other track instead of actually playing it. Nothing says my music's worth the effort like taking shortcuts. Seriously, guys, if you're gonna break my balls about every minute detail in your mix, at the very least, treat your own tracks with the same meticulousness. Don't hand me a giant pile of dog shit and expect miracles. Number 10, track labeling is critical. Please, for the love of Crom, do not label your tracks after who played them. Nobody besides you gives a flying fuck. I don't know who Brad and Tyler are or what they played. Let me know in simple terms, which guitar is what track, what mic you used. It's simple, G157, G1 Delphos, G257, G2 Delphos, and so on. And for that matter, please make sure the band has agreed on song titles before you hand me the project. Many an hour has been burned up in here, and many a dollar wasted because I have no idea what the fuck song is being referenced when I'm asked to pull up a mix. This usually involves a few phone calls to the rest of the band members when I try and figure out what the fuck is going on! Song titles. It's a little thing, but it's not. Try and make everybody's life just a little bit easier. This isn't exactly burdensome, guys. This is just basic common sense that can wind up saving you money. Number 11, don't edit the guitars. This is yet another case of I know what I'm doing, itis. If you're editing your guitars at home, you're doing one of two things. Really fucking overdoing it, or you're really fucking sloppy. Either way, you're handing the mix engineer the guitar equivalent of a diaper loaded full of diarrhea and expecting him to make a bronze statue of your guitar god alter ego with it. If you must absolutely send us your edited guitars, then please, for the love of Crom, send us the original unedited tracks as well. That way we can show you how badly you fuck things when you get the mix back. The Cockblocker plugin has sped up the edit process by several orders of magnitude, so as long as you provide a DI track like we've begged and pleaded you for, we can save you a metric fuckton of money. And please, do not edit the DI track! Seriously, leave it the fuck alone! Really. Number 12, make sure your guitar's in tune. If your guitar is poorly tuned, there is absolutely no point in recording it. This becomes more mission critical the more tracks you stack on top of each other. Now granted, back in the 60s, a Gibson SG probably wasn't being double tracked in the studio very often due to track limitations of tape machines at the time. So a little bit of tuning and stability probably wasn't that big a deal. But when you double and quad track your guitars, you can bet that tuning matters. Take the time, check and recheck your tuning. Obviously, guitars with an Evertune bridge have a serious advantage in this case, and you can just set up and go. Floyd Rose guitars, once you spend a few decades setting them up, can stay in tune quite nicely. Hell, even the new Harley Bentons come with lock tuners on them and stay in tune quite well. But even with all that, that is no excuse to not check your tuning. The last thing you want is to have to throw your tracks out because they're not in tune. Software can fix a lot, but it can't fix laziness and bad tuning. 13, new strings. Now, this is a debate among guitar players how old the string should be for recording. Myself, I like to record with fresh strings because they might be a bit brighter and will generally stay in tune better. Some guys like their strings broken in for a few days or even a few weeks. Personally, I don't think it's that big a deal. At least it's not as critical as new bass strings are. The most important factor is that your strings hold their tuning. All right, so that's it for my guitar recording guide. Hopefully you found something useful in there. If you've got your own suggestions for things we should avoid or look for, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. And next Monday, don't forget, we're going to be doing 15 things to avoid when setting up your home studio. Now, this is something a lot of you guys are probably really going to need to see. Until then, let's get out there and make some great music.